Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. We're your host. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brandon, and thanks for joining us for our latest episode. Today, we will be speaking with Nate Jackson, the VP of Acquisitions at Perch, which is a leading acquirer and operator of FBA brands. Founded by experts in technology, operations, strategy, and the Amazon ecosystem, Perch is a technology-enabled consumer products company that acquires and operates Amazon FBA businesses at scale.
Yeah, that's right. So in this episode, Nate sits down with us to discuss how Perch takes on new acquisitions, what they look for during their due diligence process, and how sellers can optimize their FBA businesses if they'd like to one day exit to a large acquirer and walk away with their own windfall. But we won't give away too much just yet, so let's dig into the interview and see what Nate has to share. And then at the end of the episode, we'll go over some of the best listings on the Empire Flippers Marketplace that highlight the growth opportunities we've learned about today. Let's get started. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. We are so excited to have Nate Jackson on with us today. Nate, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm glad to be here with you.
Awesome. Good to have you here. And where are you calling from?
I'm in snowy Boston, Massachusetts right now, but I'm a lifelong resident here, so I'm used to it.
You're built from it. Okay. Unlike Brandon and I being from Virginia and from California, we are just not used to it. That's why we ran away for the winter this year.
Smart.
Awesome. So we're pretty pumped to have you on. We know a little bit about your background, but obviously not everyone does. I was wondering if you could kick things off, introduce me to who you are, and tell me a little bit about Perch and how Perch came to be.
Sounds great. So I'm Nate Jackson, based here in Boston, as I mentioned. I am the VP of Acquisitions at Perch, which is one of the leading acquirers and operators of Amazon FBA businesses. And so, of course, I'm a customer of Empire Flippers in many ways. I've worked with the team across a number of acquisitions, which has been really fun. And I started my career as a mechanical engineer, designing nuclear power plants for the Navy, and now I sell women's leggings on the internet by virtue of Perch. So, started my career as an engineer, went on to do a bunch of strategy work, Bain & Company, which is a global strategy consulting firm, where I worked with a bunch of retailers and CPG companies that were oftentimes getting beat up by Amazon and trying to figure out, hey, how do we stop this tide that is, a real force that everyone's moving to Amazon to e-com. And in the course of that, I did a lot of acquisitions work with investors that were investing into different sectors as well. And I got connected with Chris Bell, our founder, after 6 years at Bain, actually. And he had been at Bain before and had done he had gone on to Wayfair, where he built out a lot of their supply chain domestically. And he was starting Perch with the goal that, hey, we know that there are all these Amazon sellers out there that have built businesses that started off as small businesses, but now are $4, $5, $6, $7, $10 million revenue businesses, and they get to the point where they have 21 jobs, but only so much time in the day. So wanted to build a platform that could really professionalize and focus full teams on every aspect of running these businesses and be a reliable exit partner for people that are looking for somebody who can buy their business and make them proud of sort of what we do with it after it. So have been at it for some time now. At this point, we own 23 brands and counting. And it's been really fun for me in my role as I lead acquisitions, mostly getting to know entrepreneurs from all over the world, hearing their stories, hearing how they came to the space, and then working with them to ultimately sort of work to a life-changing outcome for them in most cases. So it's been really fun and rewarding for me personally.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you cracked me up. I listened to another one of your interviews where you're talking about the women's leggings, and you were like, I like to make sure I have my hands on the product. And I think you said you went as far as trying them on, which made me laugh really hard. And I was like, I just thought that was amazing that you're so committed that you're like, I'm going to really get to know this product.
Yeah. And I would say it's beyond trying them on. I've worn them this week for sure. It helps that I'm in Zoom calls from the waist up every day, and I don't have to show up in the office, but they're...
I love it.
That's awesome.
Satina leggings, you got to wear them. Anybody who's working from home should wear a pair. Especially the fleece-lined leggings in Boston is particularly nice.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that, I love them, but it's like everyone should know that they had access to wear these, especially when you're working from home. Don't be uncomfortable at home. Just go ahead, convert to the leggings. Well, another thing you said earlier, I love that you were saying, when you were working outside of Amazon, it was like you saw this tide coming and it's like, gosh, how do we sort of work against this Amazon tide? And it sounds like you just sort of jumped in on the wave and you went, you know what, I'm getting in. And so I was kind of wondering what it has been like to go from, now you're deeply immersed in the world of Amazon and doing acquisitions versus, having been in the world of, say, traditional acquisitions. What's that jump been like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. The things that are similar are that, in my old world at Bain and Company working on these very large transactions for billion-dollar businesses, there was a whole lot of work that was based on just understanding what this business was. So if you're, looking at some obscure insurance software as a service, there's a whole bunch that goes into just understanding the underlying market, the end customer, and all that. And in my work there, you were looking at different spaces all the time. And so there's a lot of gear switching and learning new spaces. And that's true in the Amazon world as well, because there are very different dynamics to, a seed kit business versus, kitchen equipment business. But the thing that's actually really nice about buying Amazon businesses is that the channel itself is not something that you need to learn new every time. That the channel itself has a bunch of nuances to it, being Amazon, but the nice thing is that every time as a buyer that you go and look for, what makes a good business, it really comes down to things like organic ranking, things like its review positioning relative to competitors. Are they making a product that's making a customer happy? Are they doing that profitably? And, are there levers that you think you could operate potentially better than the seller, or at least invest behind new things that they haven't been able to pursue yet? And so while there is just wildly and hilariously large range of potential businesses you could buy, there are a bunch of fundamentals to it that, once you understand the rules of the road, you can really say, where do I have license to win and to do well here and to help push a brand to the next level? And where's something where, there might be more work there than makes sense in a particular way?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I've never really thought about it from that perspective that, actually you get enough comfort with the platform that you can get in really deep on those acquisitions and in a way that you couldn't in quote unquote traditional world of like having to relearn that business and really get to know it. In my sort of past life before Empire Flippers, I was working on a lot of projects had to do with, private equity. And it was really interesting talking to the bankers that would be brokering those deals and how often they would have to learn about all these different industries. I think one time one of the bankers told me, he's like, you will have no idea how much I know about potatoes. I did a deal on potatoes and it's unreal. And I thought that was great. There's a lot of beauty in being able to learn about a new business every time, but I guess it can be a disadvantage in a way where you're losing time to having to learn versus now you're all in, your head's in on Amazon. And like you said, there's wildly different products, but you get that expertise along the way. So I think that's really cool. Speaking of expertise, because I love reading through your website and seeing kind of the ways that Perch defines themselves. And I wanted to dig in on that a little bit because, on your website, it says, you're led by this idea of a portfolio led by winning products. I was wondering, what does that mean and how does that set Perch apart?
Yeah, I think to some extent, when anybody's looking at a business they'd like to own, in particular, a product that is doing great and that customers love is what I think most people would be interested in. But we really differentially believe that when an entrepreneur has built a product that is getting really well reviewed by customers reliably, that is being rewarded by Amazon search algorithm by having strong organic ranking. We think the algorithm is pretty smart and hard to trick regularly. And so, that probably means that you're offering a really good quality for a good value to the customer. When something is starting from that point and maybe just, isn't in all the markets that it could be, or is sort of only focused in narrow keyword applications or keyword potential spots. We love buying a business that's a great base, but has something that we can pull to improve. And so we love starting with a winning product. And what we want to bring to bear behind that is, increased investment behind the supply chain to, in many cases, try to reduce costs and actually, drive costs of our product to our customers down because that makes customers happier and that they want to buy more. Sometimes it's a matter of driving it to new geographies and new markets. And sometimes it's really finding new ways to drive traffic to the listing. So not every brand that we buy is going to have a bunch of splashy off Amazon potential. So, we sell some pretty boring products sometimes that are still great brands that we own, like disposable plates. And, we're not going to run a bunch of TikTok ads for that. But, for something like Satina, that's actually been a really great lever that we've been able to have some wins with, and the leggings brand. And so really the opportunity set is available will vary by business and sort of what the nature of the product is. But really the starting point is buying those products that we know have found product market fit, that have gotten customers that love them. And really the next question is, how do we maximize the number of people that can be exposed to and choose to use this product?
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach that you've taken with these products and adding them into your portfolio. If you wouldn't mind sharing, do you guys have quite a few different products currently within your portfolio? Or are you sticking with like a handful that you're really just going all in on? Or what is your take on that as far as adding in more to the current portfolio that you have?
I would describe it as a comically broad portfolio. So we have 23 brands today, really across at least 10 different categories. And we have some repeats in terms of multiple beauty products, and we've got a category manager that's focused on the beauty category, but still, body wash is very different than vitamin E oil, is very different from brushes and bath scrubs and stuff like that. So writ large, yes, there are some in the same categories, but we find that Amazon is a world of niches, and it is such a massive world. And the biggest thing for us is finding that connection point with a seller who's at the spot where they want to sell and where Perch is the best logical acquirer for their brand. And so it's much more about that juncture than us pursuing a specific category. Because even if we wanted to pursue a category, there might be a brand owner that's saying hey, I'm actually totally content to keep running this for the rest of my life. And it's more about, finding the person that it's often a personal situation or a personal choice to decide that they want to move on and have the next phase of their career life look a little different.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, so when you find a business that you're wanting to add into the portfolio, do you have specific teams that are working on, say, like you had mentioned, like the bed and bath category, and then another team that specializes in the home and decor area? Or is the team under Perch, are they all working together on these individual brands all simultaneously?
It's a great question. And I think this is probably where there are more differences in the different, companies that approach this. So I know that some companies similar to Perch maybe have one person that is running everything from supply chain to marketing to pricing on one brand. The way that Perch has mobilized itself is with a functional view. And so we have a supply chain team that's whole goal and role is delivering fully in stock product at the best cost. And they have to partner with the category teams to make sure that they know what to expect on promotions and things like that and volume expectations. But we've got a supply team that's focused on managing the supplier base, managing freight, managing our 3PL, and keeping all of our products in stock. And then the brand management itself, we've got a team of category managers that they're not necessarily managing one business, but they'll manage a collection of businesses that operate in a similar way. So, we've got a business that is home and kitchen products. And so one of our category managers oversees several brands within there. We've got a brand manager that, as I mentioned, that is overseeing our beauty products and beauty category. And so he's focused on 3 or 4 brands within that niche. And the thing is that those operate, there are businesses that have different spikes to them. So some might be more about merchandising, some might be more about promotions and pricing and advertising. And so we kind of mobilize our teams in that way. And as with all of our business, I think we're expanding the team rapidly because every new business we bring on, there's more of a need to focus in on specific areas. And so that's really how we've approached it.
Okay. That's really a brilliant approach and strategy as well to keeping the team organized as well and making sure that you don't have too many hands on one operation, I guess. So that's really great. Now, so when it comes to doing due diligence and looking for a new business or a new acquisition to take into your portfolio, are there any specific types of assets or brands or even categories that you would try and stay away from that just through experience you want to try and avoid?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've come to find that Amazon is this, I guess I'll do 2 things. One is when you think about what Perch is doing is, we're buying a large number of new brands every week for the most part. So we're not going to be doing is being in a category like cell phone covers where you have to launch new products every time an iPhone or Samsung Galaxy comes out. And like what we think we're buying is the strength of a winning product in the starting place. And there are people that have built great businesses that are built around rapid speed to launch, product redesign and launch. And if we tried to do that in a billion different categories, it would just be overwhelming to try to do that reliably. And so while we do some targeted product launch, we're more focused on categories where there's not a whole bunch of need for technological change or feature changes that are going to be needed. So there's some categories like electronics that we steer clear from. I would have told you that I would steer away from apparel because of some of the trendiness, but then, a brand like Satina surprises me and it ends up being a great fit for us, and we're really proud owners of it and it's doing great. So one of the lenses is like what categories make sense or don't make sense for us. The other lens, I would say, is more around, what neighborhood of Amazon you're in. As anybody who spent any time in Amazon knows, there are good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods of a certain sense. And we've found some niches are just more competitive, have more black hat that's going on. And the reality is we're never going to do that. And so if we bought somebody that was doing, anything artificial to boost reviews or otherwise, the windfall out of the sales would take over if we didn't know that. And another thing, even if you're not doing that, there are markets where people are just more likely to get attacked by other players. And having lived through that on at least one or two occasions, no one wants to live through that again. And so, there are niches where that happens, and we try to steer clear of places where we think that that's common, because it's a big time suck on everyone's time when you're dealing with somebody managing to flag one of your products as adult or whatever things the attack du jour is that I know people familiar with Amazon are far too familiar with.
Yeah, it's a very competitive world in the FBA space. And as you had mentioned, why make your job any harder than it already is? Already having, quite a large portfolio, you might as well just stick with those evergreen products, and maybe even those products that might have less competition that will help move the needle a little bit easier. Speaking of moving the needle and getting things going, so could you walk us through, so what are some of the general or key changes or improvements that you make to a new business once you fully acquired it?
Yeah, great. So I think right after an acquisition, there's probably like 45 days of work that's just really focused on making sure that there's a smooth integration and transition. And that, I would say, from experience, is the most important stage to make sure you've got a good transition phase. Working with Empire Flippers, it's great to have part of the migration team that's, working alongside us. And apart from that, though, really every brand is going to be different in terms of what the upside is. I would say the most clear and consistent and universally relevant opportunity for us is geographic expansion. So, quite often the businesses that we buy are just in one market, like maybe just in the US. And so we have head of European growth who we're focused on Europe as a channel expansion right now, who from day one, even prior to closing, I'm working with her on figuring out what products we're going to plan to move into Europe when, and basically getting production lined up to get listings going there to really drive expansion that way. So that's one way that we're growing these businesses. Beyond that, we'll do a merchandising review. And so quite often the winning brands that we've bought actually have really good merchandising to begin with, but it's not always the case. And sometimes there's improvements that we can make or that we'll at a minimum experiment with. So, everything from the main listing photo to the copy to, the EBC content, all of that is something that our merchandising team will review. And if something's got 85% conversion rate, we're probably not going to mess with it. But if it's sitting at 20% conversion, we know that other products in our portfolio are much higher. We kind of revisit and triage in that way. And then the third thing is really just a matter of, core marketing and positioning. So thinking about the PPC approach and the promotional calendar approach, we find that people take really different approaches to this. And sometimes people need to actually spend less, more profitably on PPC. A lot of times people can be spending more or running more deals. And really there's a bit of experimentation with that. But I would kind of group it into a couple of tranches. One is geographic expansion. Two is merchandising improvements to improve conversion. And then three is PPC and promotions to try to drive volume and ranking, and even just getting at new keywords that we might not be ranking on right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're looking at the international market, seeing if you can expand there. The marketing team is coming in, they're updating some of the listing content. And then from there, you're focusing on the marketing side on PPC. Now, on the subject of PPC, are you guys mostly focusing on just product launches using PPC as like a real strong push? Or are you constantly running optimized ads throughout the entire sales time throughout the year for these individual brands?
I would say more the latter. So even apart from launches, we find that, because here's the thing, like if you're already ranking organically number one for some key terms, it may be the right call to not be running PPC there if you're able to rank without any boost from PPC. But what we find is that there are often, tail keywords that might have meaningful volumes that you might just be on page, just the top of page 2 on. And if you actually can bump to the bottom of page 1 or the middle of page 1 on some other keywords that you're not even paying attention today, that there's some real opportunity to, sometimes double your visibility by going from page 1. It can be pretty substantial. And so oftentimes it's a matter of going after new niches that are new keywords and sort of area of search that you've got license to win, but you're not currently ranking on today. And so that's often an area of focus. There are some niches where just having more and more visibility from sponsored brands to video ads, in addition to having that organic ranking, are just helpful in terms of, the margin profiles there to have that be a good thing to do.
Awesome. I'm wondering, switching gears a little bit, I suppose it's backing up slightly in the process. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share, can be on a high level, what types of, deal structures do you use when acquiring a new asset?
Yeah, so it really is a case-by-case situation depending on what seller is prioritizing and what we think of oftentimes the opportunity or risk profile of a business. But in general, there will be probably 3 components to a transaction. One, there's a payment that's cash at closing. There will often be some sort of deferred payment, either structured as stability payment where, hey, as long as the business doesn't really decline meaningfully, there's a chunk of the deal value that's payable a year or 2 out, or it may be just a deferred but guaranteed payment. And then oftentimes there's a profit sharing earnout where they know what's guaranteed and that's great and that's what they can sleep at night. But then there's also an exciting upside that has them rooting for the ongoing success of the brand where they'll share in any profit growth that we have in the business. And we do that because we think that it aligns incentives really well and sets up for a great transition. And because we want sellers to prefer to sell to Perch. And we do think that this success in this market is all about having a referral base of sellers that would say, yes, I sold my business to Perch and you definitely should as well. And so in situations where we can really dramatically grow a business, we don't want somebody to regret having sold it to Perch, and we're excited to have them share in that upside. And so I think a great thing for sellers and a great thing for Perch as well, oftentimes when we have those aligned incentives. But oftentimes I might even come to a seller and share 2 options, right? Share like, hey, here's option which has a higher overall purchase price, but is tied, it's more contingent and tied to ongoing performance. And option 2 is like, you can turn off your brain and not worry about things anymore. And just a very personal decision as you think about which option makes the most sense for an individual. And it also depends on how big the cash payout is, because if you can, if you're walking home with $6 million, you don't really care about whether you could have made $8 million if you're going to bed at night with that kind of payout.
It's really interesting to hear about how you guys line things up for sellers, because I think this is really exciting for listeners out there who, maybe they're already at that level or maybe that's their aspiration. And I'm curious, for those who say, they aspire to one day be acquired by Perch or just to even reach that level of FBA performance, is there any advice that you'd give to those owners? I guess, is there sort of something that you wish FBA sellers knew if they wanted to align their path to be able to cross with yours?
Yeah. I think the good news is that most of what you should do to prepare your business for sale is what you're doing every day anyways, which is, building the strongest, most profitable business that you can. And so in many senses, like your instinct as a brand owner and business owner are going to be exactly aligned with what we're looking for, which is like, I think everyone's trying to build winning products, right? And it's a competitive marketplace and not every product is going to be a winner, but you can do that. And in that vein, I would say the number one piece of advice that I would have is that people, I think, often have this mindset that they're going to try everything and hope that they all work. And then they keep on sort of half investing behind, maybe 40 products in their catalog when, really 7 of them are the complete winners. And there's, 33 of them that are tying up capital and time and effort that maybe isn't worth it. And so even though they're generating sales and they're maybe generating a profit, they're spending a bunch of time there. So in general, I would say like the most impressive businesses I've seen and have bought have been people who actively and thoughtfully culled their portfolio honestly. So they might be willing to say like, you know what, this thing was making $15,000 a year. That was great. But I think that if I took the capital that I poured into that and just doubled down on my winning product or like made a variation of this winning product that I know like I know is nailing it and that the customers love it. That sort of ability to focus and sort of call losses a loss and double down on your wins. I think that's the situation where I've come in and said like, hey, this is an amazing storefront. This is a premium asset that I want to really compete hard to win. And so, versus something where I buy it and I know that I'm going to have to do a little cleanup and say, 10% of the sales here are things that aren't really actually great products. They may be good products, but they're not winning in their niches. And so I think if a seller can be doing that along the way, it's well received by a buyer eventually, but also it allows you to focus, which I think every Amazon entrepreneur probably struggles most with, is their ability to focus both their capital and their time. So that's the biggest advice I would have.
I think that's great advice. And it's interesting to hear you say that because, we've obviously had FBA sellers and buyers on the podcast. And like you said, it's that being able to focus or being intentional, being able to let go of the products that just maybe aren't stacking up the way your main ones are. And I think just having that ability to step back and actually take action. It's really interesting to hear you say, because they're all saying that themselves. And then once they did it, and once they took that thoughtful approach, like you mentioned, everything changes and they've basically got a new business on their hands. So it's cool to see that you're seeing that really work out. And I think sellers are definitely going to take that to heart. Now, listening to one of your other interviews, I got really excited because you started mentioning stuff about Shopify. So I'm really, really curious to hear what your take is there. It's just wondering, what does the future of Perch look like when it comes to getting into, more Shopify acquisitions? Is that something you're working into your portfolio? And what does that look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's an active debate that we go back and forth on. On the one hand, we know that there's so much potential in the D2C market. And honestly, there are fewer people that are buying high quality Shopify D2C assets right now, which is, makes my job easier if there are fewer people that are going after something. And on the other hand, like running an Amazon brand very well and very effectively, it's actually quite a different capability and skill set than a Shopify storefront. And there's some synergy to it. But really, if you think about Amazon as its own beast, Shopify is all about driving customer conversion and getting traffic directed to your site, building a way to engage with the customer in a way that Amazon just like really makes it hard to ever engage with the customer. And so really they're different muscles. And I would say I've seen so many e-com businesses that, they've got Amazon, they've got Shopify, and they're excited about Shopify, but it's Amazon's just such a beast that Shopify ends up being like 2% of their revenue and maybe neutral or negative in profit because they're paying for a bunch of Facebook ads. And so I think it's tricky because definitely not every business or brand has the potential there. And there are others that have just like out of this world potential. And so, my feedback on where Perch is right now, we're right now kind of doubling down and tripling down on the core, which is being the best in class Amazon operator that we can be. And we definitely have picked up brands that are selling on Shopify along the way where, call it less than 10% component. And that's great. And we're, flexing that a little bit. I think at some point, sooner than later, it's going to make a lot of sense for us to go more holistically after that new set of capabilities and muscles that I was talking about. We're not doing it right now, so I'm not pursuing entirely Shopify brands today. But this business has grown so much and moved so quickly in the past 14 months that I wouldn't be surprised if that's 6 months down the road from now that we'd be standing up a team and a function to focus entirely on the D2C engine. But right now, there's just so much opportunity in the core Amazon space that we're focused there for now. I know some others may be focused elsewhere, but I would say it's probably the minority of brands that I've ever seen out there, I would say actually have a really meaningful opportunity there. You think about like any of your really cool, sexy, visually appealing brands that will resonate with the consumer, that's where you've got opportunity. For our more like, I'll call them boring brands where, we've got a great waterproof apron, we've got a great disposable plate that Amazon customers are really happy with, that's never going to be a D2C brand, right? And that may be the majority of products out there in the world that should never have a right to be that way. But I think where there is a niche, where there is an opportunity, it is huge. And, I'm excited for when we do go after that hard. But for the meantime, we're focused entirely on Amazon as of right now. But don't hold me to that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Focusing where your efforts are paying off and where your ROI is really coming in is what's important. Now, would you guys steer away from, say, an acquisition that does have like a WordPress site or, they're doing off Amazon marketing, or does that to you maybe an opportunity where you could maybe focus on that channel more to bring traffic into those listings?
Yeah, it's definitely, if something is 5, 10, 15%, it's definitely not an aversion. It's more a matter of when it's 50% of the business and I think we probably just have higher operational risk in taking over something because our core competency and expertise is in Amazon today. Yeah, we certainly have bought brands. Like if you've got a Shopify storefront, we still are buying those businesses. It's just that we're, for something that's 50% or more Shopify, it's harder for us to underwrite the predictability of our ability to execute awesome, as good or better than the previous owner. So,
no, that makes total sense. Yeah, you want to, obviously, avoid the risk of, a majority of traffic not coming from Amazon, because obviously that's where your guys' expertise is really focused in on. So, we've gone through some pretty drastic changes in the past year or two, obviously with the current pandemic situation going on around the world, e-commerce sales, and just curious. So how has this current situation impacted your approach with acquisitions, and what kind of adaptations are you currently making through, the process of learning how to deal with this current situation?
Yeah, it's made my job harder, which is interesting. And it's been really fun because basically, for every business you look at, no matter what category, something changed in April, whether for the better or the worse. So I'm often, my starting point in a conversation with the seller is just to have them like, I've seen the financials, but I want to have the narrative of like, okay, tell me about 2020. What happened? Oftentimes it's March, the whole world stopped. April, things started flying off the shelf. So I raised price. I ran out of stock anyway in June. And, basically understanding the past year as it played out, and then trying to piece together a view of what that means for the future. Because any business, as most listeners here will know, is valued on its historical earnings. But, what I have to decide as a buyer is what I think about the future earnings. And, really understanding that narrative is important because, I think there are certain categories that saw just wild peaks this summer that are not going to be repeatable, frankly. Like you think about a splash pad outside, or, some things that everyone in the world would ever buy a product bought this summer on Amazon because they were all locked down.
Right.
Those things, it's harder for me to sort of think about how to pay a multiple of earnings when I just have no idea what's going to happen next year. And there are other things that were actually depressed. So things that are related to group get-togethers and things like that. And so most of the trickiness of looking back at the past year is saying, okay, this is what happened in 2020, but what the heck does 2021 look like and the year beyond that? In general, I think the world is going to look more normal in the future than it has in this past year, thankfully for all of us. But none of us know what the new normal looks like. I do think that, the shift to Amazon and e-com is definitely going to be, faster than it was pre-COVID, but not quite like what we saw this past year is my expectation. But also zero way that I'm going to be 100% right about all of that. And so it's made it pretty interesting. My instinct and desire as a buyer is often to, try to put some shared incentives around, like, none of us exactly know what the new normal is going to look like in terms of, e-commerce penetration and all that. And so, trying to put more of that shared incentive together with the buyer and seller. But then sometimes it's just not a feasible reality of a deal structure in the same way that I would want to. And so, what I find is that some people have higher or lower levels of conviction around what the future holds. And so there are deals that I like that I actually won't pursue that hard because somebody else has more conviction that the world's going to look a lot like it did in 2020 than I do. But it certainly made it interesting. And, I'm curious to see how 2021 plays out for sure, as we all are, I'm sure.
Now, with the impacts that you experienced and going through this learning process through the current, situation, or even just through 2020, did you have to downgrade some of the brands, or did you maybe offload a few of brands that weren't performing as much just to offset this kind of spike, I guess you could call it, in more, stay-at-home items, just to better prepare for the future?
We don't get rid of anything. So we own these enduring brands. And I guess an example of a brand that is not doing well that we own right now is a cruise luggage tag business that, no one is going on a cruise in the whole world right now. And so no one is buying cruise luggage tags. That's just an unavoidable reality that, you win some, you lose some. The great news of a portfolio factor is that most of our other products have benefited greatly from people being at home and buying things on the internet. So, I have every expectation that actually, whenever people cruise again, that product is going to come back, and it's going to, it's still the best product out there. And we're excited to own it, are proud to own it. And we'll be selling a lot of them again in the future for all the folks that are eagerly going back onto boats whenever the world's more normal. But yeah, I think at least in Perch's mind, we're never selling these businesses. We're never probably winding them down. We're operating them for the long haul. And again, thankfully, most of the categories that we own are either fine or great in the current days. And, where there's some depression, we've actually viewed that as an opportunity sometimes in our acquisition process. So
Yeah, no, that's a really good take on that. And it's funny you mentioned the cruise industry. I know you said you were an electrical engineer in the Navy. I was also a welder and a search and rescue swimmer in the Navy. So both of us coming from a boat background, I guess you could say. So it's I don't know if I'd like to go on a cruise as of right now after being stuck on a ship for 4 years, but yeah, it's still interesting to see. At the same time, so through your experience, what do you feel is maybe a great opportunity for FBA right now? So how can current FBA sellers prepare for an unpredictable future on Amazon?
It's a great question. I mean, I'm probably biased in saying this, but I'm totally honest in saying that I think it is an amazing time to sell a brand. There's unprecedented interest in winning brands from people like me and many others, candidly. And, regardless of your view on what happens in the future, this past year was awesome for many Amazon sellers. It was really hard. You probably lost sleep and tears over the course of the past year dealing with everything we just dealt with. But the end result is that you probably sold way more stuff than you ever thought you would in the course of this year. And so we've seen it. You guys have probably seen it at Empire Flippers. My inbox is blowing up with people that are interested in selling their brands after having this banner year and, getting into this position where they can have this life-changing outcome in selling their brand. And I think what a lot of people are realizing is that, hey, if I have this mature thing that's doing really well, that's grown to a certain point, and I actually know how to launch a winning brand, I could do that again. And especially if I had a couple $1 million in my pocket. I started this business $10,000. What could I do with taking a quarter of my payout on selling a business? What could I do if I started over? And so I would say the majority of people that are selling their brands to me today are going right back into the space and just, picking a new niche. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity because a lot of people, when they think about the growth opportunity for their business, it's often, new product introductions and new product launches anyways. And so in many ways, I think, for a brand owner, realizing that you can have the best of both worlds, which is you can still run a business and have this entrepreneurial life, but you can get some liquidity and take some chips off the table and go back to the table and try your hat in a new niche. That's something that a lot of people are doing. And I think a lot of people will continue to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. You'd actually answered one of my next questions, was to pretty much ask you, what is in it for sellers right now? And why is this a good time to exit? Because we've been talking about that loads internally, and we're seeing the same thing that you're saying, that there is a lot of demand. And I think people are, they're waking up to the fact that it's oh, wait a minute, this has been a difficult year for the world. However, in FBA, there's loads of opportunity. And that actually means that this might be a really great time to sell, to get a life-changing exit and pick a new direction, whether that's a new business or, just to have that windfall. So it's just interesting to see how that's even playing out for you as well. Now, like I was saying, it's obviously this has been a crazy year, as you know, and you were just mentioning that it's made acquisitions in your job harder. I was wondering, despite all of that, what gets you out of bed every day and what makes you love M&A no matter what comes your way?
I would say it is the 100% the best part of my job is that I now sincerely have friends in countries that I had never met someone from before previously. This is the absolute most global, diverse community of people that I've ever been a part of. Again, working with people from Romania and Brazil and Spain and the Netherlands, and also right here in Boston, it's been so cool to meet people from all over the world. Despite some of my comments earlier about the sort of dangers and risks of Amazon, I've found the character and upstandingness and quality and fun of each person that I've worked with to be so remarkable. It's just been so funnest thing for me has been to get to know people all around the world. And then honestly, to be a part of sitting on the end of the table and realizing holy smokes, I'm excited that we just bought your business for Perch. But for you, this is it. You're sitting there with $2.5 million that just hit your bank account. That's why you're giddy. That's why you're giggling at each other. I was kind of what's going on? Do I have something on my face? But no, you just had this amazing thing happen. And by the way, I really appreciate your friendship and like you as a person. And so I'm all the more thrilled for you to have this outcome, and it's a good thing for you. It's a good thing for us. And so I think it's just so much fun for me to getting to know people and then seeing them succeed and thrive and have this amazing thing. And then, we've all got a common goal and we're all rooting for the brands over the long term as well. And so it's fun for me to stay in touch with people and hear their thoughts on the brand going forward too. So I would say it's all about those relationships that I've been able to build and expect to continue to build. So
that's great. Yeah. It's fun to hear the excitement in your voice and to know that, you get to come to work every day and you're doing these acquisitions, but at the same time, you're changing lives in the process. And it's really neat for you, or to hear from you, that you've now dived into the world of online business and FBA and sort of like been able to see how fun I think the community is. I know Brenna and I can attest that like we obviously have a very niche part of online businesses here, but even just getting like a small sliver of it, it is a great community and it is very global and it's a new thing every day and it's been fun. So really neat to hear that you're a part of it. I guess we're going to wrap things up here. I just have a couple like rapid fire questions for you, if that's cool. So I was wondering, sometimes this is a difficult one, but what advice would you give first-time sellers?
Take a deep breath and, talk with people who have done it before. Everything will sound super scary every step of the way, but it's not that bad. It's not that hard. And, it's not rocket science. And the biggest thing for you to decide is like, is this the right thing for me to do to go ahead with selling the company? And once you decide that, trust your gut, talk to people in your circle, and I would say, make sure that you're partnering with somebody that you feel like you're going to jive with and be able to encounter the inevitable curveballs with. But apart from that, just make the decision you want to make and then feel okay that you'll navigate the steps ahead.
Awesome. I was wondering, do you have any tools or resources that you use, in your business life or on a daily basis that have just made an impact in your life?
Yes. Calendly. I have a lot of meetings. I'm not sponsored. I'm even just on the freemium version of Calendly, but it's amazing that I no longer have 3 emails to schedule a time for a call with somebody. I have a seller reach out to me on LinkedIn or by email, and I can just say, great, let's find time. And I can send a link. And next thing we know, there's a call with a Google Meet set up on my calendar. Calendly itself was a SaaS company, started in Atlanta, and I think was just valued at $1 billion after one round of $550,000 of investment like 4 or 5 years ago. So they've built an awesome product and found an awesome fit. And so different type of digital exit for them than this, but love Calendly.
Definitely rings true. Time is money in that sense, right? That's awesome. Final question here. What would you say has been your funniest moment while working in the FBA space?
Oh man, I really should be armed with an answer to that question.
Well, you started the call with the leggings, and I was going to say, well, the funniest thing or the closest thing I could think of for myself was wearing a 5 mil wetsuit diving. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, probably just like it's more been getting inside of the home of all different people around the whole world. I can't count how many people in different countries have seen my son sprint through the back of my Zoom call in a diaper yelling. And I've had the same experience on the other end. And so it's just been a really fun year to get to inside of the homes of people all around the world. And, some of the people at Empire Flippers and at some other intermediaries that I work with know my kids. And so it's definitely not a funny story that I just told, but it's came top of dome. And you said this was rapid fire. So
I love it. Now I'm sad because I know you started on video and it's like, oh, if we had, video, we might have had some sprinters in the background or something. It's always entertaining. That's awesome. Well, Nate, this has been a great call. I've really enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about you and Perch, and gosh, it's like a lot of exciting stuff coming up for this year. So thank you for sharing your time with us and your story.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Hey everyone, as promised, now that we've wrapped up the episode and learned a little bit more about how you can prepare your Amazon FBA business to exit for 7 figures or more, we wanted to connect you with some of the best listings in the Amazon FBA space. So first we have listing 47466. This is an Amazon FBA and e-commerce business in the medical and equipment niches. So what I like about this listing, it's got a really solid SKU count, only 18 SKUs that you have to deal with despite the size of the business. And it's something that I thought was really interesting was the fact that obviously it's in the medical field, it's in the medical niche, but this business has a bulk order sort of system supplying many government and medical facilities. So a really, really great client base. And then there's also included in the sale of the business, there's medical licenses that are hard to obtain in the US, which keeps competitors to a minimum in this niche. So really interesting, not something you see every day with an Amazon FBA business. There's an email list of over 6,000 contacts already in place, social media foundation, and the business has 2 VAs located in Romania who help with things like social media, customer support, PPC, and they are willing to continue on with the buyer. So that means that there's a kind of a base set up for the buyer to take this over and to keep running things pretty smoothly. So for the sheer size of this business, it seems like things have been really well optimized and would make a great acquisition for, a large acquirer or high net worth individual who really wants to dip their toe into FBA.
Yeah, no, it's a great opportunity that I saw in your listing that you've chosen this week as well, Sarah. And something that's, maybe, even an opportunity within the United States, having the extra steps that they've taken place to set them apart from the competition reminds me of another listing that's kind of on the opposite spectrum of this, where it's an Amazon FBA and FBM business, which is listing number 47853. But what is different about this particular listing is that they only sell in the UK, France, Italy, and Spain. So this offers a great opportunity, as we had discussed on the podcast call with Nate, that you could expand into another marketplace, say, for instance, the US marketplace, and really grow this business to its full potential as well. What is also included with this listing is an Amazon Seller Central account with 158 SKUs. Now, don't let that scare you away necessarily, because again, there is an FBM side to this monetization for the business. So ultimately with this business, to break down how it is laid out, is there is a 60% coming from Amazon FBA and 40% coming from FBM. So you aren't necessarily having to manage 158 SKUs all on your own. Again, there is FBM side to this particular business, so you wouldn't have to necessarily feel like you're overwhelmed with too many SKUs. But also what has been set up with this business in particular is there's a 3PL company they use to send products to Amazon warehouse, and then they also have a team of 6 to 7 employees who work on the quality checking and packaging of the products as well too. So it's not necessarily something that you would need to be completely hands-on with this particular FBA business, as there are already a team of other employees that are currently helping the seller maintain the asset at this time. Also, what's included with this business is a trademark and SOPs. So they've already set themselves apart from the competition by establishing a trademark, but there's also SOPs in place should you have a team already of your own that you would like to take over this listing, and you already have a set of operations and a team in place that you'd like to just fully acquire this, similar to what Nate was talking about on the call as well too. Another great opportunity with this business is that the products are all top selling products on Amazon's Choice, and there's also over 10,000 reviews with 4.6 stars or more. So a great following, a great foundation ultimately to build on and to expand even further into this marketplace, which is going to continue to grow in the future, as we discussed on this podcast call. So that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Opportunity Podcast. We hope that you've gained some valuable insight to the opportunities that digital acquisitions offer. And if you would like, click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace to learn more about these businesses or other listings currently live on our platform. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a comment and subscribe to this channel for more great content that is released every single week. So until next time, we're your hosts. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Sarah, and thanks for tuning into the Opportunity Podcast.